Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecini. We are presented by The Athletic. Today on the show, Mark Schindler is here, and we have a simple goal for today's show. We want to break down what the F is going on with 5 teams league-wide. We're not totally sure what's happening with these teams. Some positively, like we're going to talk about the Knicks here, mostly because we both wanted to talk about the Knicks and the great run they're on. I feel like I haven't talked enough about that on this show over the course of the last 6 weeks or so. They just feel entirely positive in a lot of ways. And so we're going to talk about like sustainability and everything. We're also going to talk about the Blazers, who I have no idea what to do with right now and are in the midst of, I think they've lost like 8 of 10 or something like that at this point. And they're trying to find answers at this point. And the team in general needs to find answers because they have real team building questions here moving forward, given that Jeremy Grant can hit free agency after this year. So let's jump in there. Mark, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good, man. I just bought a new whiteboard, so I'm excited. I always get dogged for this. I am a written notes person, so like if I go to a game or something, I bring a notebook with me because I don't like taking notes on my phone. It just doesn't stick for me the same way. So this is gonna be my 4th whiteboard that's in my room. I've been my entire week. I've been like pulling up whiteboards and looking at them on Amazon. And today was the day. I just broke. I caved. I bought one. I'm excited. So much more room for activities. So it's great.
I think I saw that, like, was it you? Did you text me or something that you were looking at like a 94 by 48 inch whiteboard or something?
Yeah, it was 96 by 48. It was on sale yesterday. I ended up not buying
it. That's
it.
like a wall, Mark.
Yeah. Well, I ended up not buying it because I was short by about a foot of wall space. So that was sad. I couldn't go vertical with it either. Yeah. So I settled for like a 48 by 32.
You're a strange human.
I like writing. It's like the visual stimuli. It's nice. So, but yeah.
That is so much space.
Even on sale, it was like multiple hundreds of dollars. So for the best for my bank account, but I saw it. It hit my vision, and I was like, this might be the best day of my life, and it ended up not being, but it was close enough. So
yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay, so we're going to talk about the Blazers, the Knicks, the Clippers, the Pacers, and who's our 5th team, the Hawks.
Yeah,
and kind of dive into what's happening, team building moving forward a little bit, maybe trade deadline potential. But more importantly, just what's going on with these teams today, because they are very bizarre teams across the board in many circumstances. Then we're also going to talk a little bit about the mock I released as well at the end of the show. I'll tweet out when we're going to do that, and you guys can come join. But Mark also released a mock draft today, so he wants to dive into all of this and the draft in general a little bit. So instead of breaking down one specific prospect at the end like we typically do, we're just going to talk about the draft a little bit more generally today. So Mark, let's start with the Blazers, because this is a weird team. This is the team you requested to talk about. Like when we were trying to figure out what we wanted to talk about this week, it started with the Blazers because you just really wanted to talk about them. And I was like, okay, like let's do the what the fuck is going on with them teams, right? And the Blazers kind of stand out to me in that regard. So I'll just give you the floor. I know you were super excited about talking about the Blazers, and I just want to allow you that space to do so.
Well, first of all, I appreciate it. I badgered a friend of mine, Mike Richmond, and letting me on Locked On Blazers to do the same because I just have so many thoughts about this team. Like we talked about last week, I think Dame's been legit all NBA worthy this year. Even when he's fought through injury, I think there have been times where he's been a little bit deferential because you can tell that he's been bothered at points. But now, he's still out right now. I think he's coming back in a day or two, hopefully. But point being, this team is it's odd to talk about a 19-21 team and say that I feel like somewhat optimistic about them, not necessarily in like title contention status or anything like that. But they're just fascinating to look at because this is one of the few teams that I felt like I couldn't really peg down what they were headed into the year. Because I didn't know what Dame was going to look like coming off of the abdominal injury last year. I wasn't sure what he would look like this season. I thought maybe he was a real regression candidate, getting older, coming off an injury. That's been the opposite. And he's done a ton of heavy lifting for them. And what's been fun too, like there are a ton of enticing things going on with the roster. Like I think Anthony Simons has taken maybe not taken a step, but I think you're continuing to see his growth and evolution and as the secondary shot maker and scorer alongside Dame.
Yep.
Which considering like it feels like it was for a long period last year, but that really only happened on his own for about 20 games. So seeing that in a continued stretch has been nice to see. But then outside that, I think, Jeremy Grant's played like a borderline all-star this year.
Yes.
Really hasn't been any dip from him. He's been fantastic as a shooter. The face-up and post stuff has been legit. I think his defense hasn't been all defense level, but it's still been pretty good. And there's just so much to dive into with this team because I think a mutual friend of ours, Nikias Duncan, wrote a really great article recently, I think just after Christmas, about how Dame is being used as this fantastic off-ball scoring threat. And while that's been the case and it's been awesome to see, I actually think that they don't lean into Dame enough, which is odd. But it's also part of their roster.
Yeah, like the interesting thing is like they're not leaning into Dame as much in this season of heliocentric superstar like performances, right? Like it feels like Dame, for the fact that he's averaging 27 points a game and has been absolutely terrific, it feels like he hasn't had that big explosion. Like he had 41 in 2 out of the first 3 games this season, and I think he has one other 40-point game against Denver in a game they lost by 1 back in December. But like we haven't had that like that enormous Damian Lillard game, it feels like, yet. And he's been the guy that's like almost been synonymous with that over the course of the last 6 or 7 years, it feels like, or at least a guy that's been synonymous with that. So for him not to have that yet in this season of, Donovan Mitchell going for 71 and Luka Doncic breaking the scale and, Nikola Jokic going even further than breaking the scale and, Kevin Durant going nuts, just across the board. We've had so many great games. It's weird that he hasn't had one. And I do think that it goes back to exactly what you're saying in terms of they are playing him a little bit more off the ball, whereas these guys that have been going off have been a little bit more empowered on the ball, maybe is the way to put it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's kind of a difficult balance there because I think on one hand, like I was just thinking about this the other day and I was like, I wish that they'd really lean into more of him doing pick and roll. And I was like, well, why don't they? And I think a part of it is they really need to get the most out of Nurk by using him as a high post facilitator and a DHO guy. So I think we've seen less of that. But also, I think it's difficult because they've had to use more multiple handlers and getting more creative with the offense. And even though it feels like it's for the worst, and I think sometimes it is, how would you rate this as a shooting team?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, look, they're shooting the shit out of it this year. Just, Anthony Simons shooting 38, Jeremy Grant shooting 42, Damian Lillard is like just an unconscious shooter. But other than those guys, they don't really have anyone else.
Exactly.
Like Yusuf Nurkic is like an occasional shooter, I guess, who makes them, but doesn't shoot at enough volume. Josh Hart doesn't really take them. I guess Shaedon Sharpe like kind of takes them sometimes, but it feels like teams are like fairly comfortable to let that happen. Right.
Yeah.
Like if he's the one shooting, all due respect to Shaedon Sharpe, I think that teams are like, okay, this is probably a win for us on this possession. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's in a tough spot because like you just mentioned, like, okay, so Ant and Dame are combining for 21 threes a night. That's a lot. They shoot the ball incredibly well. It's entirely like so much of it is pull up shooting and stuff off movement too. Jeremy Grant has been electric as a shooter this season, but then you pull outside that. Okay. Josh Hart is taking 2 threes a game below average. And even like recently, like he's just not even shooting them. He's passing up wide open stuff. He's not getting closed out to. And you go up and down the roster, and all of their wings are just guys who are pretty hesitant shooters or guys who are not going to get closed out to. And part of the issue, too, with Shaedon right now, and not even an issue, like he's a rookie, it's stuff I want to see improve. He really likes to do 1 or 2 dribble side steps or get into a 20-foot pull-up instead of attack. Like, I clipped this the other day, but he'll get a wide open look and his shot prep isn't there yet. He's just more comfortable getting into, going straight up with something. I mean, being able to isolate a little bit.
And that's something I talked about earlier this week on Twitter. Like, I think Magic fans are frustrated that Cole Anthony hasn't yet taken a jump as a catch and shoot guy. Cole Anthony's a player that even in the NBA to this point has had the ball in his hands throughout his entire career. And then you go back to North Carolina, you go back to his high school tape, particularly, he never had to catch and shoot, right? It's not his natural inclination to just catch and fire and like be ready to catch and fire off the just hop, right?
Yeah.
It takes more time for these guys that have had that kind of development throughout the course of their careers to learn those catch and shoot footworks, mechanics, even just like the tendencies to break the tendencies. I think when your first instinct is to drive, then what I think people give it credit for, like everyone just thinks, oh, if you can shoot pull-ups, you can probably shoot off the catch. Honestly, I think that's probably true that you can learn it, but I don't think necessarily that it's the quickest thing to develop necessarily.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that entirely. And I think it's just going to take time. Like, I think Shaedon's going to be great with that in a couple years, but right now, like, I think that can be a hindrance to their offense. And that's the biggest, again, not problem / issue, but like just watching the Blazers play, they get a ton of gravity out of what Dame and Anthony are doing off the ball. But the second you remove Jeremy Grant from the equation, or you remove just one of them from the equation, their lineups really crater offensively. And that bears out in watching and also just going through lineup data. It's just think about it. Okay, if you have Jeremy Grant on the bench and you have Dame, Simons, Nurk, Josh Hart, and like, even if you have Sharp out there, okay, Sharp is not getting hard closeouts right now for the most part. Josh Hart's being completely sagged off. Nurk, most of the time, guys aren't even coming up to meet him at the level. It just depends where it's at with that.
That's the guy we need to talk about, I think.
Well, yeah, at some point we're going to talk about him in a sec. But like, point being, like, okay, teams have been comfortable and have routinely just been loading up with guys having 1 foot in the paint on the entire weak side because of what the off-ball spacing situation can be for them. So that makes it difficult. And especially too, like, they have a lot of guys who are quality secondary playmakers, but without the shooting, it's a lot harder to get it more out of it. So I think this can go into talking about Nurk now. I guess, how would you rate Nurk's season?
Bad.
Yeah.
No.
I think
not
so.
Good.
He's in a hard spot because, like, I don't think that Nurk is a bad player, but I think for what the Blazers need and what Chauncey Billups likes to do, what this roster is gearing towards, Nurk is not a good fit. Like, I think
that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, I really like the leaning into what they've done with trying to with running Dame off screens more and just being a more like a high post oriented offense. But also at the same time, I genuinely question if they do that if they didn't have Nurk, which, like, yeah, of course, like, if you have a different player, you're going to incorporate different skill sets. But I think that this team would just be so much better or more dynamic offensively and better spaced if they were able to just be a more dynamic pick and roll team, because Nurk, even though, like, you can look at all the shooting splits, like, it looks good, but he's still not finishing that well at the rim. The actual pick and roll impact isn't huge from him. I think, like, obviously the short roll stuff can be good, but I don't think it's anything incredibly amazing from him. And more so too, like, they've been more willing to camp him out above the 3-point line than have him roam near the dunker spot. And I do wonder if that's something that maybe they start to change up. But like, again, like, it's nice that he's shooting 40% on twos, but the problem is, okay, the defense doesn't care. Like, it's great if the shot falls, but it's not on super high volume outside of a couple of outlier games. And if the shot, like, again, it's a process thing. And I think overall this isn't making a huge impact on the offense. And I mean, the defense too is where it's hard, because, like, I was thinking about this yesterday, and they love to run multiple coverages. Part of that is, the roster that they have. Like, they have a ton of guys who are quick, and They are honestly pretty small now with Nasir Little and Justice Winslow both out still, and that's definitely hurt them on the defensive end. Particularly like watching the Portland game, like they got pretty bodied by what Orlando could do, just by the sheer volume of size that they had on the court. But I think I look at this and it's tough because I don't like Nurk is okay if you put him in a deep drop, but he's not a very good rim protector.
Right.
I don't think his help, like he can have okay help instincts, but he just has such little lift, particularly off his back foot. So that inherently limits a ton of what he can do as a rim protector. They'll play him close to the level. They'll try and hedge and recover with him sometimes. I think that there's like some value in him being big and okay mobility wise compared to other guys who are 6'11". But for what the actual return is, I think that it generally just tends to be more of we have to play this way because we have Yusuf Nurkic rather than we're playing this way because this makes us better. And I think that's just it. To me, if there's going to be a significant improvement on this roster, I do think it comes through moving off of Nurk and not even necessarily getting a better center, but getting somebody who gives you a more direct path or something that's more streamlined per se, or easier to incorporate into what they're doing.
I'm glad you bring up the idea of streamlined, right? So overall this year, the Blazers are a +6 when Damian Lillard is on the court. When Lillard is on the court with Nurkic, they're only a +1. When Yusuf Nurkic is off and Damian Lillard is on, they're a +8.3, which is like a terrific basketball team. And then when it's Drew Eubanks and Damian Lillard on the court, they're actually a +10.3 in 360 minutes so far this season, which says to me that it's not necessarily about Drew Eubanks being like, some incredible center, although I think he's absolutely proven himself as like being a genuine NBA player, really effective backup center. It's more, I think, that what happens when Eubanks is out there is just simpler stuff that allows the other Blazers out there to just not have Nurkic kind of taking up space and like having to be involved in the offense as much.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think like just bringing a real lob threat is huge too. Like especially for a more dynamic pick and roll game. I think that's fantastic. Like I like you're mentioning, I think that he has some warts defensively. Like he's really solid at being the hedge and recover guy that they like. He's not a great drop defender. But again,
do you know like what they're averaging in terms of like points per 100 possessions when Drew Eubanks is out on the court?
I do not.
126.2 per 100 possessions, which says exactly what you're saying. Like Eubanks has that weird like short roll game and like the, I don't know, what do you want to call it? Floater, push shot kind of deal that he throws up. But then he's like a lob threat going toward the basket. Like there is just a lot there that he does that Nurkic doesn't do that I think is a better fit with this team.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's not even that we're saying that he needs to like, move Nurk so that Drew Eubanks can start. It's more like get somebody who's a similar idea so you can make what you're doing a little bit more like that, more replicable, more just more continuity through what you're doing. And like, to be fair, like they try and run some of the high post stuff through Drew Eubanks and it can be hit or miss for me. But
so can I bring up what my idea is then?
Yeah.
I think this is the team that should try to convince the Spurs to part with Jakob Poeltl. Like I think he would help them quite substantially, more so than other players. Like he's a terrific screener to get shooters like Anthony Simons and Damian Lillard free. He is a smart short roller that has that same little push shot that Eubanks does. He's a way better defender than Eubanks, just kind of across the board. Like I think that it would allow real continuity going from Poeltl to Eubanks, starter to bench units. And on top of that, he does provide just more of a threat as a roller at the end of the day, going all the way toward the rim. And it's just simpler. He's not going to have the ball in his hands as much. It's going to allow Dame, Simons, Jeremy Grant to rock a little bit more.
Yeah, I could be open to that. I think alongside that too, like the other thing is like just adding more shooting alongside what they have, like injecting that into the rotation with and it doesn't even have to be like good shooting. Like I think literally if you have guys who can spot up and lift, like I think that's really all that they need to add in their off-ball players right now, because they can just be that lacking in that sometimes. But I agree. I still am curious to see how willing the Spurs would be to part from Pirtle. But what's so tough with this Portland team, and why I want to talk about them, because part of the reason I didn't have expectations, like we mentioned, like I didn't expect Dame to be this good when you have a guy who is playing this well. And like, yes, they're 19 and 21, but they're also like 3.5, 4 games out of being a lock for the playoffs. Like the West has been a shit show down from the 5 seed to the 12 seed right now. And that's not that teams are bad. It's just like they're kind of going through it right now. And I think what's interesting with them, and this is not to be like completely derived with pessimism, but I mean, the team is shooting. I think Dame and Anthony are both shooting 30% from 3 since Christmas. Like that's going to change. The overall shooting of the team is going to just swing back because that's how it works. It's not always going to be them shooting the worst that anybody has in the history of the league. Like it's going to change. Like I'm not saying they're going to shoot 45% from deep next, but the offense will revert a little bit. So I think like, again, like I'm pretty comfortable saying this is an above 500 basketball team at the end of the day. And when you have a guy like Dame who is playing as well as he is, we always have the conversation about Dame. I feel like this is the latest we've ever gone into a year without a Chris Haynes article dropping about Dame's status in Portland. And I just am curious to see what they do and how they approach that, because it felt like this was more of a rebuild in the offseason. And now I think, again, not that it's the same as the Pacers. It's definitely different, but like in terms of there are a couple directions this can go, and I think the trade deadline is going to be really important for them figuring that out.
Yeah, I agree. I'm like trying to come up with constructions to get the Blazers, Jakob Poeltl, and then maybe like they take on the Doug McDermott contract or something to like try and reduce.
Especially if they're trying to run. Like I would like Doug there. Like Doug's good.
I would too. I completely agree with you. It's hard for me to find the numbers that totally work, but I think that there's probably an avenue to do so. It would have to be like Justice Winslow, Keon Johnson, Yusuf Nurkic for like Poeltl and McDermott, and then obviously a first round pick or something like that. Like you have to, it might even cost more than that, to be honest, to get Poeltl out of San Antonio. But if it's more than that, like the Blazers should be out at that point. So it's complicated, but I do think that they are very incentivized to try and get a center like Jakob Poeltl at the very least that could be a roller, have some dexterity with the ball, everything like that. We'll see where that goes.
Yeah. And anything it's tough too, because they just paid Nurkic in the offseason. I think it was 4 for 72. Which that's not saying that they can't move on from him, but that does make it a little bit different. So I'm interested to see what they do.
Yeah. And frankly, like I'm curious to see how negative that contract is league wide. Like that actually could be like a fairly negatively valued asset league wide. To where teams don't want to take that money on. So, okay. Let's take a quick commercial break and we will be back with more. Okay, Mark, we're back. Which of these teams do you want to go to next? I'll just ask you.
That's a good question. So I think we can more rapid fire some of these ones. Let's talk about, do you want to talk about Indiana really quick?
Yeah, let's do the Pacers because they're actually a bit in the news right now, it would seem.
Yeah, Shams Charania just tweeted that Tyrese Halliburton is out with, I believe it was a bone bruise on his knee and will be reevaluated in 2 weeks.
Has a left elbow sprain and mild left knee bone bruise.
Wow.
So just bruise across his left side of body. How long he's out for is incredibly important for the Pacers' direction here. If they lose like the next 6 games or so, it probably pushes them substantially down the board here, and they will have to make some very real difficult decisions. moving forward on how to attack the deadline.
Yeah. It definitely throws a wrench. I mean, they're 23-19 right now. They're 7th in the East. That's a surprise to everybody. The Knicks just passed them last night. They're same record, but because I think they're 2-1 in the head-to-head, that pushes them ahead. So yeah, they continue to be really interesting to me, and it feels like nothing has directly come out, but just based on like every murmuring that is mentioned about the Pacers, it just leads me to believe that they are a lot more aligned with the idea of going to the playoffs this year than they were before the season. And I think I've teetered on that, on like how to feel about it. I think I've gotten a lot more warmed up to it in their more recent stretch. Like everything since Christmas has been like really good. I think that you could poke some holes in their resume before then, but now I think you can just comfortably say this is a good basketball team. I mean, you probably could have said it earlier. It just took me a little bit longer to get there. But exactly like you mentioned, I mean, Tyrese has been their best player this year, hands down. He's been incredibly important for what they do, especially on offense. I don't know what that's going to look like with them trying to do a lot of stuff that they do without him. But also, I mean, Andrew Nembhard has been awesome this year and really impressed as a rookie. So I'm excited to see what he does, getting a lot more handling opportunities. But exactly like you're mentioning, I think if they go on a skid over these next 2 weeks, especially leading up to the trade deadline, it does bring up a little bit more because Miami's right on their heels for the 8th seed. And then when you start talking about this team being a play-in team instead of like, when they were the 5th seed and looking more like, okay, this is when you're talking about a team being a lock for the playoffs compared to you have to fight your way in. I think that there is a little bit of a difference with that. I mean, I'm trying to pull up their upcoming schedule now, but yeah, where are you at with this team?
Yeah, so their upcoming schedule is on Friday they have Atlanta, they have Memphis on Saturday, then they go on a 4-game road trip: Milwaukee, Oklahoma City, Denver, Phoenix. Depending on if Devin Booker will be back by January 21st, I don't think that he will be. Will he? Doesn't seem like that'll be the case. There are a couple winnable games there with Phoenix and Oklahoma City, although Oklahoma City is frisky and pretty good at home. Memphis is obviously quite good, and Atlanta is weird, and we're going to talk about Atlanta here momentarily. Then on January 24th, they play Chicago, and then January 25th, they play Orlando on the second night of a back-to-back out on the road. And then they travel back home to play Milwaukee for a 3rd game in 4 nights. And that takes you through 2 weeks, basically, when Halliburton is going to be reevaluated. Now, reevaluated does not mean that he'll be back in 2 weeks, which is really critical here, because the schedule then becomes at Memphis, home against the Lakers, home against the Kings, home against the Cavs, at Miami, home against the Phoenix that probably will have Devin Booker by that point, on the road against Washington, home against Utah, home against Chicago. That takes us a month out. So the schedule it's not terrible. It's not ideal, though. I would say it's certainly going to be one of might be somewhere between the 10th and 15th hardest schedule during that time. It's not an easy run. It's not a bear of a run necessarily, but how they perform leading up to the trade deadline is going to really make some decisions for them. And that is why they are now purely a what the fuck do we do here team. Before, I honestly think it was wait, how is this team good? Basically, before, what are they doing that makes them good? And it was just unselfishness, offense, running really crisp offense, getting great ball movement, figuring out answers defensively by the time Miles Turner came back. There were answers, but now, man, it throws it for a wrench, especially if they think that Tyrese Halliburton might be out beyond that 2-week period.
Yeah. And on the other hand, too, he could end up only being out for maybe he comes back early and, just kind of blows us away. But yeah, it's especially too when you're talking about there really hasn't been anything reported on Buddy Hield and his availability, which makes me think that there's a lot more potential with that happening. Everything that's come out with Miles Turner continues to be there's interest in renegotiation. And I believe, if I remember correctly, Jake Fisher from Bleacher Report earlier this week had reported that contract negotiations hadn't gone through yet. Like I think Miles and his camp were looking for something higher. And that's not to say that they were turning things down. But point being, like, they're hitting the point where it's like, okay, either you have to have him re-signed or you're trading him, because I don't think that you can afford to take this into the offseason. I think that would, A, just be bad management. And B, like, I'm just kind of tired of this playing out. It's happened every year, make a decision finally. And it's in a weird spot because, like, exactly like you mentioned, like, if this is a team that really views Miles as part of the future, and he's played really damn well. He's been their second best player. At times he's like even overlapped Tyrese for what he's needed to do defensively. Like, you can look at this team and be like, okay, well, outside of adjusted defensive rating, they're 19th right now. And that is mostly on the back of what Miles is doing. Like, this overall defense by the team is pretty lackluster. There's a lot to be desired, and they don't have a lot of size. They don't have a lot of guys that I would call great one-on-one or individual defenders. The off-ball defense is problematic. They really just kind of staple things together because Miles has been fantastic on the back end. That's not to take away from others, but point being, like, he's been that good. So I think it's hitting a really interesting zone of what happens here. And I think what is important for people who maybe haven't watched Indiana as much to realize is, like, if you trade Miles, like, that's a full tank move. Like, that's not
this
just
thing falls apart very quickly if they trade Miles.
Where the drop off from Miles to Jalen Smith starting at the 5 or Isaiah Jackson starting at the 5 is immense. Like, that's neither of them are even close to that level defensively. Neither of them are bringing quite the same thing where he's at offensively. There would be a pretty steep fall off. So I think that would be a pretty big indicator of where they're at and feeling. Like, even if you go right now, I think they would only be their draft pick would be 20th right now, which is it's the kind of thing where, again, like, I think that they do need to think about it, because this year, when we're talking about what they can be in the future, like, all indications have been from them that they want to be, like, they don't just want to be an easy out, a quote unquote tough out team. They really want to be a contender in the next 2 to 3 years, really build towards that. And I think if they want to get there, they do have to prioritize their own draft pick. And part of that can come through, like, they have the Cavs pick and Boston pick. I don't anticipate either of those falling through this season, because the Cavs are pretty locked into what they're doing, unless a massive injury hits. But point being, like, I think those are hitting. They have the ability to be really flexible and try and move up in the draft if they want to be aggressive here. And I think that's something they should look at. And maybe there's stuff that pops up at the deadline that makes them more open to move. Point being, I think this team needs to be focused on making home runs. Like, they are not here to hit a single or a double at the trade deadline. They're not here to hit a single or double with the draft. Like, they really need to be locked in and focused on doing what is going. Well, I'm not trying to, like, overemphasize this, but I do think, like,
I think you're right to overemphasize it. This has been the singles and doubles team for a decade now, outside of Paul George being there, right? Like, I guess you could say, like, Victor Oladipo was not a single or a double, but they had to move Paul George. Like, it's, it's complicated, I think, by a number of different factors here. So if I'm them, they're 5 games right now out of the number 6 spot in the draft, basically. If Tyrese Halliburton's going to be out 3 or 4 weeks as opposed to 2 weeks, and this is something I'm sure that they have more of a feel for internally than what the public information is going to be, given that they're reevaluating him in 2 weeks as opposed to, him just being out 2 weeks. They need to make, like, some pretty real decisions here about the future of the franchise. And maybe that is renegotiating and extending Miles Turner and giving him, like, a $20 million balloon payment or something this year, and then negotiating a contract extension that gets a little bit more team friendly moving forward. I talked about the mechanics about, like, on a Miles Turner extension last episode with Danny LaRue when we broke down the trade deadline kind of lay of the land. Turner is one of the best assets that any team at the deadline can acquire, though. And if they find that they offer Miles Turner, like, a large amount of money and he is still not willing to take it, they need to be willing to make a move here, because as good as Miles Turner is, you can't lose him for nothing. I don't think. I would rather keep him if I was the Pacers, but you can't lose him for nothing and run that risk moving forward.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think on the keeping him thing, especially with how well he's fit, I would be open to that. Like, I think that it's just like, again, like I need it to just make a decision. I'm tired of getting dragged out. I get why it gets dragged out, but it's just, um, like I get frustrated sometimes because I feel like there's not as much understanding about like Miles's frustrations with the organization. Like I kind of get it. Like he's
Yeah.
every single year he's been here, he's been in trade demands, and I think he's played well enough at this point to say, okay, either you're fully bought into what he's going to be with the team, or you move him because I just don't want to hear him in trade rumors. Can be frank, but
Yeah.
yeah. But exactly like you mentioned, like he's played like a fringe all-star this year. I think if the team defense was better, and again, that's not on him, he would be getting more love for all defense. I still don't know that he'd be quite there for me. But again, like I think that skews when you're on a team that's worse defensively and you have to cover up as much.
Yep.
But yeah, exactly like you're hitting on. I'm there with you.
Yeah, look, if you're keeping Miles Turner, I think that it's worth continuing to go for it. If you find that he's not willing to re-sign, then you need to prioritize the draft pick at the end of the day, given that Halliburton is out now for at least a couple of weeks, and we'll see where it goes from there. I don't know, man. This gets very interesting in a hurry now. This is a weird, what do we do now situation. And so much is going to depend on like what they look like in these next 6 games where they play. Like Atlanta is a really good gauge on Friday night, I think. Yeah. At Oklahoma City is a really good gauge next Wednesday, I think. Honestly, like, at Milwaukee, maybe at Denver, those games without Tyrese Halliburton, they can't win a 7-game series against those kinds of teams. So I don't know how good those gauges are, but trying to, compare yourself against the teams that you're theoretically in a tier with, what happens when we lose our best player? How competitive are we in those circumstances? I do think that it's worth kind of diving in and trying to figure out what that looks like. Okay. Yeah. The next team that I want to talk about, the New York Knicks. I love the Knicks, man.
Yes. Yeah. They're fun.
I got to be real with you. Is this the most fun team, purely fun, outside of like the Derrick Rose, Joakim Noah prime Chicago Bulls team that was like a 1 seed basically? Is this the most fun Tom Thibodeau coach team that you can remember?
I think I would probably struggle with that one just based on the early season and those vibes. But like of late, yeah. I mean, it's so weird too because they had the 8-game winning streak after getting absolutely blown out by Dallas, having that terrible stretch. It felt like any day Tibbs was going to get fired, and then they got absolutely lucky with, I believe Jokic was out for Denver. Utah was kind of off the night that they played. I just like that, and then it just ends up they have the turnaround. Quentin Grimes comes back, or I should say, gets reinserted to the starting lineup, playing more minutes. He cuts down the rotation. They go on the 8-game winning streak. Then they follow that up with a 5-game losing streak with some absolutely baffling losses in there. Part of it was just late game stuff that really bit them. They struggled a little bit with how many minutes they were playing because they had 1 or 2 guys out of the rotation. So they had to bump minutes more, but also Tibbs doesn't bump minutes more. He just plays guys 40 minutes. So like that Dallas game, they had a significant lead and then they end up losing in the fourth quarter because guys are, losing in overtime because they're totally gassed.
Also, let's be clear that was the Doncic 60-20.
Oh yeah. Like Luka was amazing. Like point
yeah.
being, like Luka's amazing, but that was, that's still a game where I look at him like, okay, part of that's difficult, but, the Jalen Brunson has been awesome. That they lost to Milwaukee.
Let's start with him.
But what he did against Milwaukee was sensational. He's up now. He was shooting poorly to start the year. He's up to 39% from deep now on 4.5 attempts per game, averaging 22 points, 6 assists. The defense is still, I mean, that's going to be a problem for him. He has not been a good defender really for any stretch this year, but what he's brought to them as a live dribble creator who can get into the paint at will has been massive. And you see their offense really take a hit when he's off the court. I mean, he's been so important for what they're doing. And if they continue on this trend, I think that I wouldn't be shocked if he makes the All-Star team, especially like considering fan votes where he would end up over Julius right now. Not that the fans vote should matter as much, but and I mean, that's time.
And it's, by the way, it's opening up now with Halliburton being out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that actually really helps him potentially make the All-Star team. So over Jalen Brunson's last 26 games. So that's the stretch after the win at Utah, after the win at Denver, those single digit wins where Brunson had like 25-8, 21-7. Over his last 26 games, Jalen Brunson's averaging 23 points, 3 rebounds, 6 assists, shooting 46% from the field, 43% from 3, 84% from the line, while getting to the line 5 times per game. That's been the big adjustment, I think, with Brunson having the ball in his hands more. He's getting to the foul line way, way more and getting easy buckets. I think that's actually like that has upped his points per game number probably by 2.5 points alone this year, just getting to the line more and being able to attack more capably in that way.
Yeah, no, for sure. I totally agree with that. And what is so tough about this team, and I'm not meaning this as a slight. Like I wrote this when I wrote about Quentin Grimes. I think it was a week or 2 weeks ago. Because again, like it feels weird talking about a guy who's averaging 11, 3, and 2 as like this game-changing player, but he has been for them. Like he is one of the few guards who I think is always going to have his name, as long as like injuries and stuff don't happen, always going to have his name in the mix for all defense. Like his defense is that good, off ball, on the ball. He is such a good screen navigator. He mirrors guys about as well as you can. Really good reactivity, hand speed, everything. Like he has the full package. So that changes their defense automatically because Mitch Robb has been like really good as a rim protector for them. And when their rotations are on point, they can cover things up. But they had a lot of struggles getting stops at the point of attack without Quentin. That's changed up. The defense has been fantastic over the last month.
Well, and let me piggyback off of that. Having Grimes around to take on those tough defensive assignments has been able to shift RJ Barrett away from that, which has been super, super valuable because RJ was not having a great season, having to guard the best players on the opposing teams.
Yeah.
He's been much better guarding the second best perimeter player on opposing teams. It actually gives him a little bit more energy, I feel like, offensively as well, to be able to not have that assignment defensively and not have to expend that energy defensively. The other guy that I think has actually taken a bit of a leap defensively this year is Emmanuel Quickley.
Yeah, he's been amazing. Like he's been other than Grimes, he's been their best perimeter defender this year. And that's not a knock. Like he's been really good.
Which is a bit surprising, I think. He has great length, but like coming in, he was never all that quick necessarily. He was never a guy who I thought like was super high level on that end. At Kentucky, more than anything, he guarded up the lineup because he had that length. I thought when he guarded guards, he was not awesome necessarily defensively. But over the course of the last couple of years, particularly now over the course of this season, he's gotten so much better at guarding at the point of attack. He is really, really good defensively now. And that's why, look, I understand the fact that there's a real question about whether or not you want to pay Emmanuel Quickley or whether or not you want to continue to open the cap sheet moving forward, right? Given that you're in a big market, given that you're the New York Knicks and you're playing this incredibly fun brand of basketball right now, that should be an attractive place to play for free agents. So I do understand why they would be tentative and why they would consider potential trade avenues for Emmanuel Quickley. I think he'd be a big loss for them.
Yeah.
Like I really think he'd be an enormous loss for them.
Yeah, he hasn't. I mean, he had that starting stretch about a week ago. He returned to the bench last night, but he's been one of their 4 best players this entire year, without a question. Like, even with some of the offensive issues, like what he brings to them as a facilitator and what he's done defensively has been pretty irreplaceable. But I think, like, exactly like you're mentioning, it's tough because, and this is, I'm not reporting anything. My assumption is that the trade rumor stuff came from his camp. Like, I am pretty sure he's unhappy in not getting the opportunities to really be a full-time starter. I think that he's at the point where, like, I legitimately would say that he's close to having earned that. Like,
Do
obviously,
not aggregate this.
yeah.
Mark is not reporting this.
As I said, I'm not reporting. Like, but I mean, that's I feel like that's pretty easy to decipher. Like, he's a good player. It's just there isn't going to be upward mobility right now with Brunson and Grimes. Like, that's pretty set in stone. You can't get up over that. So I am interested to see what happens with that, because we keep seeing, like, even again, like I mentioned, like, we're still seeing trade rumors come out about Quickly and other teams calling on him. So I'm interested to see what happens. But like you mentioned, he's been so important. And what's tough for me with the Knicks, again, I got away from this earlier.
Can we finish up on Quickly real quick?
Yeah, for sure.
Move to the Knicks generally. You mentioned that little stretch where he's been starting here and there, right? So over the course of Quickly's last 12 games, he's played 35 minutes a night. He's averaged 18 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, only 1 turnover per game in that time. He's turned the ball over 13 times in those 12 games, which is bonkers for a guy who has the ball in his hands as much as he's been having the ball in his hands. Shooting 46% from the field, 37% from 3, 85% from the line, while playing really good defense. Like, you can understand why Dallas keeps coming up as an idea for Immanuel Quickly. It's hard to imagine someone be a better, replacement for Jalen Brunson than that right there in terms of what he's bringing to the table. If they want to move him, I understand the concept behind why you would want to move him. They need to be prepared for a big drop off if they do. I've long been a little bit lower on Immanuel Quickly than most people have been.
Yeah, I think you and I have definitely been. We've been in odds on him before.
But we need to just acknowledge he's been really great this year. He's like, I thought he was even a little bit overrated as a rookie. Like, I think he's actually pretty underrated now with what he's doing.
Well, exactly. I mean, kind of like you're mentioning, when I hear him to Dallas, I'm like, for what? Like, what am I trading him to Dallas for? Like, you're sending me back I mean, even like, I love Dorian Finney-Smith, but I don't think that I make that move. Like, does that move the needle really? Like, is that change? And even for Dallas too, like, Dorian hasn't hit the same this year, but they kind of need him for what they do. So that's just, random throw out. But
it'd have to be like the Knicks really like Josh Green and something.
Well,
like Josh Green in a pick or something like that.
So that's exactly what I want to get into, because like you're mentioning, part of what makes Immanuel so good for this team, and same thing with Quentin, they move without the ball. Like, they really they can flow without being part of a play. I think that's why Grimes is so important, because he's a movement shooter, but he's a movement shooter who doesn't necessarily need movement sets run for him. Because Tom Thibodeau does not run movement shooting sets. He does not run looks to open up 3-pointers. It's all off drive and kick. It's all off draw two. That's something that he has not changed. He's not going to change. I think we can pretty concretely say that now. The man is like 70 years old. It's not going to change. So that's where I worry about adding guys who are who need to have things run for them specifically, that maybe don't necessarily fit in with this. Like, I think that they really need players who can play with some randomness, who can be able to play within a broken play. So that's why I always have some hesitancy with, like, okay, if you bring in a guy like Cam Reddish, that's not his game. Like, that's not what he can do. And I think, like, obviously there's a disconnect between what Cam really can do and what fans think he can do. But just in fairness, like, that set him up to be rough. Like, so exactly, like, I think it just adds in like another mode of, like, you need to be really concerted about what you're getting out of this and what they want to do. Because this has the making of a good team. But I think that there are still things that they need to figure out. Like, I think making a move at the backup center position would be good for them. more, maybe even that's just moving Isaiah Hartenstein so they can play Jericho Sims more. And that's part of it is frustrating to me because I think like Tom's scheme has really limited what Isaiah Hartenstein does. Like they don't play to his strengths at all. So to be fair, he has not had a good season, but like, I mean, I don't know what you expect. I think that's what's frustrating about the team at times. Like, and I don't mean to be like unhappy about a 23-19 team. I think it's more so I just look at this team and like they could be a little bit more. And I do that just wears on me a little bit. But
I'm ecstatic about this 23-19 team.
Oh,
so
yeah.
you can even out my.
You know what we didn't even say?
My
RJ Barrett has been fantastic of late when he's been healthy.
Yeah,
he
got that
really
little
started
like
off the year
cut
rough.
on his finger or whatever. But yeah, since oh man, it feels like again like right around that time, maybe a little bit after that Utah Denver game. Like it feels like he's been great too.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up the stats right now because from the Dallas game.
Them.
Oh yeah,
it's from November 21st over his last 19 games. He's averaged 22, 6, and 3, 45% from the field, 40% from 3. Yeah, that's phenomenal. That's like really, really good production at the end of the day. The other guy we haven't even mentioned this guy's name yet is Julius Randle. You said that I do think that I would say Brunson should be their all-star over Julius Randle, if only because I think that Julius's start to the season was
that's fair.
As immensely frustrating as it was. Julius Randle is also averaging 27, 12, and 4 over his last 22 games.
Yeah.
Julius Randle has been incredible. He's been amazing.
Yeah, I mean his shot number got dragged down by what happened in the Milwaukee game, which I think got clowned way too much. I would have probably told him to not shoot 9 threes if you're missing all of them, but I appreciate that over taking 9 step back 18-footers. Like there's been a legitimate change in process. I think there are still the frustrating things that happen with him, but the touch has come back to a certain degree from where it was last year. He's making the right plays when things happen. It's not the same snappy stuff that you would like, but it's so much better than it was last year. And it is legitimately impactful stuff. Like he is good.
Yeah.
He's been fantastic getting to the line, drawing fouls, being aggressive in the paint. And I mean, for what this team does, he's been essential to it. So I can't complain about him. Yeah. The defense I can't complain about, but the offense has been good.
Look, you mentioned Mitchell Robinson's rim protection and defense. Like this team is miraculously 10th in defense right now, like on the back of Quentin Grimes and Mitchell Robinson, and to an extent Emmanuel Quickley. Like he's been really good defensively. Deuce McBride comes in and annoys the shit out of people for like 15 minutes a night. But like, man, what Mitchell Robinson has done defensively this year in order just to like keep this thing together has been absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, he's been really impressive. It's been cool because I remember last year I was just so bummed when he did the dirty bulk and like absolutely shot his mobility. This year, I think he shed some of that weight, but also he's just comfortable in his body again. You can really tell like it took him some time to get accustomed to the weight gain. And it's paid dividends because he's stronger now. Like he's much better holding up in the post than he used to be. Like in that Milwaukee game, he was much better playing against Brook Lopez than he has been in the past. He's much better playing against stout post players than he has been in the past. We haven't really seen any offensive growth, but I don't really care. Like obviously it would be nice, but like we kind of knew the thing with Mitch when he was coming out of Western Kentucky, or can we even say coming out of Western Kentucky? Coming out of
high school.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like he does what this team needs him to at an extremely high level. And the defense has like, again, the rim protection is stellar and he has more of that mobility back. I've loved watching him play compared to, I mean, it's again, like same thing. Like we just talked about Julius coming off of what last year was. It's been really awesome to see this bounce back season from him.
Yeah. I think the Knicks this is my hot take right now. I think Knicks are a playoff team. I think straight up.
Yeah. No, yeah, I think they're
not a play-in team. I think they are a playoff team. I think they finish in the top 6.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Miami has been better ish. I feel like every time I start to say that Miami's been better, they find a way to not be. But yeah, I mean, I think I can get there. Again, it's a lot's going to hinge on what does or doesn't happen at the trade deadline. But yeah, I mean, this team is they're solid.
Do you know what they are currently in net rating?
They're above top 10.
Yeah, they're eighth in the league in net rating right now.
Yeah,
like they're actually they should have more wins than they do right now.
Mm-hmm.
This is a good team. Like I'm just straight up like in on the Knicks. Like I think they are good, which is not something I expected to say this year, but I was very wrong about that.
Yeah.
Okay. The Los Angeles Clippers now, the biggest. What the fuck is going on with this team in the league for me? Because I can't figure it out from a game-to-game perspective what to expect. Like they just lost 5 games in a row, 6 games in a row, and they dropped games to the Pacers, they dropped a game to the Timberwolves, they dropped a game to the Hawks. Like games that this team, with how deep they are, I know that they have guys in and out of the lineup, should not lose. Having said that, given that they have had so many guys in and out of the lineup this year, do you have any idea like what a good Clippers team looks like yet?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think this team is just kind of difficult to watch at times. Like we know what the defense is. I think that's something you can bank on. Like Paul George has legitimately been I wouldn't say lockstep with OG Anunoby, but he's been right behind him as the best wing defender in basketball. He's been awesome this year. But the offense just overall for this team is to say it's a slog would almost not do it justice. It's so frustrating because they go through stretches of it looking really good. They go through stretches of like, oh, hey, like, look, we just drove and kick and the ball moved around 4 times to the open shooter. Awesome. But so often it's just like, okay, we're going to kick the ball and then somebody's going to hold it for 2 seconds and then the advantage is going to die. And like that's so routinely their offense. And I think what's hard too is like they have a lot of guys who are versatile defenders, but they're not versatile offensively. Like Robert Covington just is like this has not been a good Robert Covington season. Like I think he's had some stretches of late that have been better. There's a lot of guys who again like bring versatility, but I think their limitations can really stand out in the way that this team is designed and how they generally play. That makes it difficult to get the most out of everyone. Like this is a team that very much to me needs to parse down their rotation in some meaningful way. Like they're playing 10, 11 guys every night. And this, again, it's not that players are bad, but like that, I mean, I can hear Nekias Tungan's voice in my head saying they need more rim pressure. And it's true. Like they need more ways to impact the rim. I think getting a true backup center outside of Visca Zubac would help in some ways. Cause like part of the reason why is like, if they don't have any kind of roll gravity alongside their pick and roll game on the bench, like it just doesn't really do anything other than tough shot making. But where are you?
That's just like, that's not even it for me. Like they just don't have guards really. It feels like the pressure of the rim either, like at least in a way that's threatening. Like teams don't really care if Reggie Jackson's taking possessions over Paul George when he's out there, or Kawhi Leonard when he's out there. Teams are happy. Teams are happy if he's taking possessions over Norman Powell. You know what I mean? Like, and Norman Powell, it feels like, is living a lot in the mid-range. And Luke Kennard is obviously not pressuring the rim at all. Like, it's hard. It's just really, really hard. And on top of it, they don't really get ball movement either. That's actually the thing that frustrates me most about them. They just don't get ball movement. And it feels like everything is always so stagnant. And this has been the thing with them for the last couple of years. Like Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, even when they were healthy, like it felt like this team was a bit stagnant. Now, that's all the negative stuff. The positive is that, holy shit, Kawhi Leonard is back and his on-offs are absolutely bonkers. This team, when Kawhi Leonard is on the court, is a plus 7.8 with a 115 offensive rating and a 107 defensive rating. Like in his last 11 games, he's averaging 23 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, and 1.5 steals on 52, 39, 82 shooting splits. Like the game he played against Dallas earlier this week, Luka had like 43, 11, and 7 or something crazy. Kawhi completely dominated that game. Like he got to whatever spot he wanted. He got to whatever place in the mid-range, and he just like absolutely old man gamed them. It felt like where he was just backing them down, or he was catching and shooting from 3, or he's going to drive, stop, use that deceleration step, pull up. And because he's so strong, just nobody can move him. Nobody can do anything about it. Like he is so good, and he is getting back to the level that he was at. The problem with all of this is he's played 19 games. And I have no idea if he's going to play all of these games in the playoffs. Like him and Paul George this year, when they're both on the court together, they're plus 8.6. They've only played 200 minutes together this year. Like, what do you do with that? Like, can you count on that? That's why they're the biggest question mark. I actually get why people think they're a legit contender because, again, the Paul George minutes say that they're a legit contender when he's out there with Kawhi Leonard. But at the same token, how much can you rely on that? They played 200 minutes together this year. That's it.
Yeah, it makes it difficult to analyze for sure. Because exactly like you mentioned, like Kawhi is awesome, and this is, again, it's not a knock at Kawhi, but it's just Kawhi. But it's just talking about their actual offensive process. Like 14.5% of his shots come at the rim. Like,
yeah,
it's not that he can't create. Like, obviously he creates for others. Like the mid post doubles that he draws are huge. But again, it's just overall they have to rely so much on the tough shot making. I mean, it's the same story that's been the last couple of years, but it just feels even more so punctuated this year. It's been tough because I think there have been moments where the John Wall signing has worked. For the most part, I'm not there. I don't think that he's been particularly good defensively. He brings a ton as a playmaker, don't get me wrong, but it's just if they're not out and playing in transition with him, what are you getting? And they play slow pace. Like they don't play very fast paced basketball. Like they like to kind of grind things down. So it's like I exactly like you're mentioning. Like I think the answer is getting a guard. Like this is a team for me. I'd love to see them get Emmanuel quickly. Like I don't.
Well, here's the answer that they've tried the last couple of games. They've played Terrence Mann at point, and I think it actually has, like, process wise and structurally looked really good when he's been at point, because he is like, I think in those games he's only averaging like 2.5 assists per game, but he's just the consummate ball mover. He's so unselfish. He's exactly what they need out there to like be able to facilitate ball movement and keep the offense in flow so that they can get these open jumpers that they are so reliant upon. He's awesome. Like I am such an enormous fan of Terrence Mann.
Yeah. I mean, he's someone I'd love to just see him continue to play more. That would be very nice. I think that would be great for them. I am curious if how much of that is just like, oh, well, you know, we're tinkering with things and it's because some guys have been out. So we'll see how it goes. But so I'd like to see that continue because exactly like you're mentioning, it's not even that they necessarily need like a quote unquote true point guard, but it's like you're hitting on with Terrence, same idea with Quickly. Have somebody who can rip and run, get a deep paint touch early, and then go from there. Like you don't even necessarily have to have somebody who's like straight up running spread pick and roll all the time and getting to the bucket. Like, yeah, it would be nice, but that's not what this team is built to do. If you can just have somebody who you can empower to carry the ball and generate some kind of paint touch, like great. That's good by me. So I am interested to, like you mentioned, I want to keep seeing how they do stuff with Terrence Mann because his role has been all over the place this year, and it's nice to see him get more run. I want to see that continue.
Yeah, this team right now is 27th in offensive efficiency, despite the fact that they are top half in 3-point attempts per game and 9th in 3-point percentage. And like, you know, as Nikias eloquently puts it, like get a paint touch, like they're actually 12th in free throw rate even. And, you know, obviously a lot of those free throws, you know, some of them are Ivica Zubac's free throws, you know, some of them end up being, like John Wall free throws, where he's not a great free throw shooter in general. But for the most part, like if they're getting to the line and making threes and taking threes, you would expect this to be a top half offense. And it just isn't, because I think they're easier to guard than what their talent says they are.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. Because like if you can just be in the way and force them to, well, not even force them, but just like lull them into being stagnant. If you get back in transition, and yeah, I mean, all you have to do is stay in front. And like, yes, on the one hand, it's like, okay, well, PG and Kawhi are really good shot makers. They're going to shoot over the top of defenses, but exactly, like I think it's you're able to play some of the numbers game with them, hope that you can make impacts defensively in other ways, and you live with it. So I want to see them do something to get more dynamic, because again, it's the same story we've been talking about.
Let's talk about the Hawks to finish up now.
Cool.
I don't know what to do with this team. This feels like the biggest, what the fuck is going on in the Eastern Conference to me, certainly. Over the course of their last, let's go with 15 games, they are, I believe, I'm trying to do math in my head really quickly. They're 3 games under 500 in that time. I know that. They were 13-10 at one point, and they are now 3 games under 500. So they're 6 games under 500 in their last 19 games. And it feels like things aren't going well in terms of the way that DeJounte Murray and Trae Young are mixing, which is something that I kind of talked about in the preseason in terms of having questions just about, like, Trae doesn't love to move off the ball. DeJounte likes to have the ball in his hands, but when he doesn't have it in his hands, he's something of a guy that teams will sag off of, although he has made 34% from 3 and has been willing to at least fire from 3 this year, which has been helpful. I don't totally know what to do with them, because on top of it, like, it just feels like it's time for John Collins to be somewhere else. John Collins is a really good player. He's averaging 13 and 8 right now, and he's just better than that. He's not shooting well from 3. You expect more. You expect more from him, but also it's just like very, very difficult to really get anything from him, I guess, with how much Trae Young and DeJounte Murray have the ball in their hands. Feels like they haven't found the mix yet for Collins. And then it just feels tricky. Like, DeAndre Hunter is okay. He's not like a dude. You know what I mean? He is a good on-ball defender that doesn't quite make as much of an impact off the ball. AJ Griffin's been a really nice surprise, but AJ Griffin isn't ready to, like, frankly, probably be a starting player in the NBA yet. He's just a little bit limited still, as good as he's been this year for a rookie. He either needs to be the 5th guy out there, or he needs to be off the bench. And I don't know about you, but like, when he's out there, like, it feels like he's more dangerous than like DeAndre Hunter and Clint Capella. Like, it almost feels like at times like he's like their 3rd best option.
Well, it's hard because he's like their one offensive outlet other than Clint, who really makes an impact. And that's the other point too. Like, this team is, Clint has had a good season, but like, this team is incredibly reliant on him being healthy, because I think it's helped because Onyeka's been better recently, I think, but it's not been a great season for him. Part of it's been like, I don't think that he's been he still struggles playing full-time 5. Not just by virtue of size. His game doesn't fully mesh with Trae's yet, in my opinion. I think Trae really benefits from having a lob threat, and not that he can't be a lob threat, but like, Onyeka really thrives in that, being able to hit his touch shots around the rim, being able to get into that like 4 to 10 range and be active roaming around the dunker spot. And so it just hasn't been I think that it can come with time. I really believe in him still a ton moving forward and who he's going to be. But I think how small he is has really it continues you feel it in watching him.
Yeah, you do.
But again, like, I do think it's been better recently. But I think it's just you talk about a front court that has a lot of guys, but just how they fit together is really awkward. And exactly like you mentioned with Collins, like, it's tough because like he hasn't shot the ball well. I believe in him to be a better shooter than he's been this year without question. I think it's just a slump. It's part of how he's been used in the offense. He doesn't get nearly as many touches as he has in priors. It's been waning for a while.
Well, he doesn't get as many ball screens either.
Yeah.
Part of the thing.
Well, exactly. Like he's just in a weird spot. They're like, okay, be this off-ball player who doesn't get this in the same way that you used to. That hasn't worked. And to be fair too, like defenses have treated him as a non-threat most of the time. It's a weird balance. Trying to figure out what their stuff is. Because Bogdan's been back. That's been nice to see. I think that he's brought some nice things, especially as a shot maker and being able to function in second side stuff. But again, like the offense isn't inventive. It doesn't feel impactful most of the time. And sort of similarly to what we talked about with Portland, but in a different way, like their outlet guys just aren't there yet, or aren't really there, period, in terms of what they need to really juice the offense. So it's a lot of, it kind of reminds me of like a really average brand of instant coffee is kind of how I would describe the Hawks right now.
So like Landry, like I've talked to Landry Fields a couple times. Landry Fields, really, really smart guy. Landry Fields is also like a first-time head of basketball operations who's going to have to make a really difficult decision here. And this is a tricky roster to try and manage. And I'm really interested to see what this looks like here moving forward with Fields. I think that he could be like great at this potentially, but he's in a tough spot. And this is going to ultimately be like one of the more consequential decisions of his tenure is how does he try to fix this front court mix? So I'll ask you, maybe not specific players, but like, what do you think they need to do in order to fix the front court mix?
That's a good question.
What are the kind of players they need to target? Maybe is a better way to put it.
Well, they definitely need to trade John. Like, just do it because of what with where this is at right now. It's just not tenable. But like, even like to me, they need movement shooting in a bad way, like a very bad way. That's what I look at in their front court. Like, they need more dynamic, and I think part of that too. Like, they don't run dynamic sets. Like, they aren't very active in finding great ways to get their guys looks. But I think you inherently, by getting somebody who is a movement shooter, you add in looks like that. Like if you get Doug McDermott, like not even saying like that's I'm not trading John Collins for Doug McDermott, but like point being like getting a guy like that who you can bake into an offense and get more gravity without necessarily having the ball and trained just by having it trained to Jonathan's hands. Like that's important. And also just having more. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, like, here's the other complicated part about this, right? Like, they traded a lot of their draft capital for DeJounte Murray, right? And they traded Kevin Huerter, for a pick. But if you're trading John Collins, what are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to fix the front court? Are you trying to get, like, multiple pick assets back? Because, like, I sent you a trade last night that, like, is kind of, like, off the wall and, like, crazy, I think. And, like, I don't even know if I would do it for all of the teams involved, but it was like basically like the Hawks get multiple first round picks, take on the Yvonne Fournier contract, take a miracle flyer on Cam Reddish again in their case, and then like give the Rockets John Collins and then give the Knicks Eric Gordon or something like that. Right. And I don't even know if I like that move for the Rockets. I don't even know if I like that move for Atlanta, frankly, but like if they're trying to replenish the pick capital, it makes some sense in some way. But if they're trying to do something else where they're trying to like rebalance the roster and trying to find like a few different options, it becomes harder. The other problem for them is that it does not seem like ownership wants to pay the luxury tax there. And, it feels like they've said they will pay the luxury tax, et cetera, et cetera. I don't feel like they're going to pay the luxury tax for a team that's 19 and 23 at the very least, or 19 and 22, whatever they are. They're like $1.5 million away from the luxury tax right now. I don't know if I want that either. So like, I don't know if they're going to want that. Like, I don't know if they're going to be able to take on money to be able to like get something for John Collins that is valuable. it's a really hard trade to make for them because they have to weigh what happens if Trae Young asks out. I think that they're just like rebuilding on the fly on some level, building around DeJounte, Onyeka Okongwu, AJ Griffin, etc., and getting a bunch of picks and young players back. If he doesn't ask out and this continues to fail, like you have to really consider trying to cash in on DeJounte Murray again when he has one less year left on his contract. But like if it works somehow and you can make a move that evens out the roster a little bit more, maybe you can like try to make this fly a little bit better. It's a hard decision to make what you prioritize in a John Collins deal, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I think it's just a tough spot because, like you mentioned, I think a lot gets lost in that this is an ownership problem more so than a front office problem. Like, if you just have cheap ass ownership, that really limits what you can do. Like, I'm not Landry Fields, I'm not Travis Schlenk, but I would imagine that things go down differently in the Kevin Huerter trade if they get the green light from to actually be over the cap. But I mean, exactly like you're mentioning, it's like, okay, well, what is our direction? What are we trying to do with this? What are we trying to do moving forward? Because I mean, I got pushback on this from Atlanta fans. If you make the move that you made for DeJounte Murray, like that's not that it made them a title contender, but the idea is, okay, we're building into what this group is and trying to be better and being competitive. Okay, well then continue taking steps alongside that. Like, I don't think you can just be where you're at right now and be cool with that. Like, there's got to be steps alongside this. And it's, again,
well, they move Kevin Huerter then.
Yeah,
like trading for DeJounte Murray, then moving Kevin Huerter are antithetical decisions to one another. Like, it does not make sense to do both of those things. And it never made sense. That was a wild decision that it feels like was based on money, not based on, Kevin Huerter being not a fit anymore. Because what would be valuable to put next to DeJounte Murray and Trae Young? Maybe a floor spacer who can knock down shots and make shots off of movement and actually create some offense that way. What would be a way to accentuate Kevin Huerter's game? It would be to add a guy who can take on tougher defensive assignments and not force Kevin Huerter to take on tough defensive assignments often. What are we doing here is my point. Like, it's incredibly frustrating to me. Incredibly frustrating.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's just a weird spot, and it's not even like I have liked some of the stuff that's come out of this team, but it just feels it feels muddled, and I think moving Collins is the first thing to kind of unraveling that. But I don't know what the long term, and even, or I should say, just more short term. Like, I don't know what the rest of the season is supposed to be for them. Like, this
just in terms of salary cap matching, you're going to have to take on someone. Right. Like, you're gonna have to take on players for John Collins, right? How are you trying to even out the roster? Are you trying to slide DeAndre Hunter down to the 4 and pick up some wing players to even out the roster? Are you trying to pick up a better like mix at the 4 who's like more of a floor spacing 4-man, like almost like a Harrison Barnes maybe or something like that? Like, what are you targeting, I guess, would be my question.
I think for me, kind of like you just mentioned, like with what this team is right now, and I think that they just need to lean into being having some multiplicity on defense. Not saying that they're going to be good on defense. Like, I think obviously they've been better this year. They've had more signs, but I think to really juice the offense, like DeAndre is just not a 3 on offense. Like, a lot of that is how he sees the court. He still pauses a lot with the ball in his hands. He's just better as a 4. I think that I actually like would argue like you're going to get a lot more out of him playing the 4. Like, you can be a little bit more comfortable with him doing some of the, it's not secondary creation, but like secondary scoring stuff, if he's able to take advantage of slower footed guys potentially. And that only is going to come by having a 3 who is able to actually be guarded like a 3. So to me, and exactly like, okay, well, who are you trading John Collins for that is going to bring that back to you? And maybe like, and I'm not, kind of like you hit on, I don't know that AJ Griffin is ready to be a starter, but in essence, if you like, the idea is like, I want AJ Griffin and DeAndre Hunter to be the starting wing tandem, ideally next year. I think that's the hope. that you're able to develop into that, or you get somebody at 4 who is you're feeling good about that with. I the biggest thing, like DeAndre just being healthy this year, like woo, thumbs up. That's the first step, but like exactly like you're hitting on. I just don't think that it's tenable for him to continue being the 3 with what the offense is right now.
I don't know if these two teams want to make a move again, because the last one created a lot of friction within the basketball world. Atlanta and Dallas line up in a really interesting way, I think, though, with these two rosters. Because Dallas has all of these random shooters on the wing and at the 4, Dorian Finney-Smith, Tim Hardaway Jr., Reggie Bullock. Like, you could make a case to try and get back Christian Wood. And can you imagine John Collins, rim running for Luka Doncic?
I mean, that would be sick. I would love to see
it. That'd be phenomenal, I think, in a real tangible way. If they decide, like, if they can't come to any sort of agreement with like Christian Wood, I wonder if trying to get Collins is like your long-term solution at the 4. Just how they acquired Spencer Dinwiddie at the deadline when they knew that Jalen Brunson's contract was coming up and kind of got out ahead of it. Mm-hmm. I wonder if they could do something like that.
See, my issue would be, I think with all the difficulty that there's already been to fit in John Collins, and how are you fitting in Christian Wood? Like, not that they're the same player.
But... I'm not even saying that Dallas moves Christian Wood more than anything. I'm saying that, like, maybe you do something like Dorian Finney-Smith for John Collins, or like Dorian Finney-Smith and some other stuff, obviously, for John Collins, right? It kind of evens out the roster a little bit more in Atlanta. Dallas gets its potential long-term pick and roll partner for Luka that doesn't probably require a crazy amount of assets to do, which still probably opens them up to another star trade down the road, which I think is important for them, because I think they can move 4 first-round picks again after this season, assuming the Knicks pick transfers. That's an interesting one for me, I think.
Yeah, that's something I need to think more about. I just, exactly like you mentioned, I just don't know who is making the trade for Collins and that you get enough back that it's worthwhile. Like, I know, stuff had been floated plenty about Collins for Jay Crowder, and what does that do for me? Like, on the one hand, like you mentioned, I think that gives you the ability to be a little bit more, open things up, how they want to play offensively. I don't think Jay's better than John, like even close to that. But I don't know, like maybe, like, I know Washington has been reported in being interested in John. I don't love the idea of a Collins Porzingis front court. But like, okay, are you getting Denny Avia or Rui Hachimura back or something? Like, that doesn't really move me. Like, I think Denny's interesting. Like, that could be interesting on the Hawks. But again, like, you still have some of the same issues. Like, that's not necessarily helping what you're doing floor spacing wise. They don't want to be like, I think for the most part, if you want to get the most out of somebody like Denny Avdia now, you do have to put the ball in his hands a little bit, because otherwise he's not getting guarded. It's just not a lot of great options right now, which means, of course, something random is going to pop up and it's going to look great. But here's another, think about this. What if they traded John Collins for PJ Washington? Not saying that either team should do it, but a little bit of just a swap. See, it seems like there's more traction, especially with PJ being an impending free agent. Not that it's perfect or anything, but.
So in money wise, because PJ is not making a crazy amount of money, what are you sending back? You probably have to send back Kelly Oubre in that case as well,
I guess. Yeah.
Doesn't really help their floor spacing, but I guess does kind of help their shot creation when one of Trey or DeJounte is off the court. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not like,
I get what you're going for.
Yeah,
but
yeah, exactly. It's just, I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard. That's a tough one. Okay, Mark. The Hawks are in a weird spot. I don't know if we came up with answers. They're just like a pure, what the fuck are they doing?
Pretty much.
Let's transition from that to what in the hell is this NBA draft in 2023? Because you wanted to talk about this after I released the mock draft today, after you released a mock draft today on your Patreon. Weird NBA draft. What is your take on this 2023 NBA draft?
Yeah. I don't know if I have a what do you mean take? Like my overall takeaway from from how it's shaping up, or
yeah, let's go with that.
I think it may be interesting is the best way to put it. Like, I feel like there are so many ways that it could go. I feel like I almost have like less answers than I was hoping for at the beginning of the year. Not that I think anybody has fallen through with like that part has been nice. Like, I don't think that there's been any player that has like just massively disappointed is unfair, because I think their expectations are set beforehand. I don't think that there's been anybody who was extremely underperformed to an extent. And we've had some guys who I think have outplayed what we expect. Well, okay. I mean, like there are like Derek has struggled, but I think he's looked better lately. Like they're
Derek Lively.
Yeah, well, okay. Part of I wasn't a big Lively guy before the season.
Dylan Mitchell.
Yeah. Well, Dylan too. I was about what I expected. Like, not to be unfair, but yeah. I mean, okay. So there are guys who have you get my point. It's not like when we go back, 2 seasons, and there are guys who are not even getting drafted that were projected in like the top 5, top 10. So, but this draft is really fun because there are a ton of like 3-4s who do stuff. It's like a lot of guys who already have 1 or 2 tools, and the next tool is the one that puts them into being like a legitimately very interesting player. And I think that's what excites me greatly about this draft. Like, obviously the top end is very exciting. I like this lottery is very fun, but the 15 to 25 guys is like that's the stuff that makes my head explode a little bit, because I'm looking at like, again, like I'm thinking of all the guys who could be exciting. Like, okay, what if Chris Murray's like, I don't think that he's going to be a lottery pick unless some stuff like really changes up. But like, okay, Chris Murray is a really interesting player. Like, I envision like, what does he look like if he can go somewhere that really needs a 4, like Taylor Hendricks. Depending on where you're at with Gigi Jackson, I ended up having him just outside the lottery. I know, if I remember correctly, you were close. I think you had him like fringe of the lottery, like 16.
15, I think.
15, 16, yeah. Like Maxwell Lewis out of Pepperdine, Leonard Miller out of GLI, Arthur Kaluma. Like, there are just a ton of guys who like they can do things, and if you get a little bit more out of them, it moves me. So that's my really rangy way of talking about it.
So where I'm frustrated with this class, I like the top 2. Obviously, I like the depth in the lottery. You can get a couple spots outside of the lottery, and I think it's pretty good. I'm really struggling with the depth of this class, I would say. I don't really love the depth of this class, to be honest. There are some like interesting upside swings that could happen if guys decide to declare. Like, if Noah Clowney decides to declare early, that's someone worth doing some due diligence into. Interesting player. Julian Phillips. Like, if Julian Phillips, like if you do due diligence into him and you feel like he might learn to shoot at some point, that's a really interesting player, right? This, that, and the other guy, right? But like, I'm struggling to find, even guys like at 20, like I have Jordan Hawkins at 22. Like, I don't know if Jordan Hawkins can dribble and like pass right now. I have guys in the first round that I don't feel super great about as first round picks right now. Marcus Sasser is like kind of an undersized guard. He had a great game last night, finally. Leonard Miller is like 6'10" and big and has been productive, but doesn't really shoot it at this point. Like, has the funky mechanics where like the offhand is way involved, and it's like kind of coming like inside his body a little bit. And I don't know if I trust him to make it work that way. There's just a number of guys that like, I don't feel great about Terrence Shannon even being like a first round pick right now. And he's, a 6'6" wing that just has never shot it consistently, right? Good defensively, but what do you do with that if he can't shoot it consistently from NBA range? Like, if he can't be a 35% 3-point shooter, what do you do? I'm just really struggling with the depth right now. I would say, like, I am desperately hoping that a big group of these freshman players really emerge and just become high level prospects, because, and this is something I've been talking about with scouts all year. Like, scouts have been hunting. Like, there was a reason earlier in this cycle I mentioned like scouts are reaching out to me constantly about Donovan Clingan right now, trying to get information on him. It's why like I don't know if you saw, there was a big like internet surge for Grant Nelson at North Dakota State.
Yeah.
Who's like a interesting guy who is 6'11" and can put the ball on the deck. He's like a white kid that can really jump and like has real flexibility. If you watch full games of North Dakota State, it does not look as good as the highlight reel guys. Like it just kind of doesn't, in terms of like, he's, averaging 16 and 8 and he's really, really good in that league, but like projecting to the next level, there's still a lot to figure out there. I think like I like Santi Aldama like quite a bit more than what I like from Grant Nelson at this point. So it's hard. Like it's really hard. Teams are out there hunting right now to try and find depth picks. And that's why like these late first round picks, it wouldn't surprise me if teams at the deadline are pretty cavalier about moving them. Like if the Pacers really wanted to go in potentially, I wonder if they would look to move one of those picks. Like that could be an interesting move for them, given they have two of them. And we don't know how valuable those picks are yet.
Yeah, maybe I'm too optimistic about what some of the back end guys can be. Like I'm going to write about him soon. I'm writing about Bryce Hopkins tonight and finishing that up. But I'm writing about Jordan Hawkins next because I like Jordan Hawkins a good bit more than you. Like I think we have him around.
I have him at 22 to be clear.
Yeah. Oh no.
Like,
I mean, in terms of like what, like I have a lot more faith in the passing and stuff. But like the shooting is just so nutty. Like
yeah,
Terrence
it's
Shannon,
phenomenal.
I think Terrence Shannon is tough because like I still think like the shot is better this year, which granted, not necessarily a huge step up, but he had the slump in December. It's been better since about Christmas time.
But this is who he's always been. He's always been this streaky.
I know that he's always been streaky, but again, it's the volume. He's improved his release. It's gotten better. And the driving has been even better too. Like he's doing stuff with his right hand now. He used to never drive with his right hand. He's doing a lot more with that. I believe in the passing. Like I don't think he's going to be a star, but like I think that he can be a spot starter in the NBA. Like I think that there's a lot to like about him.
There are scouts who agree with you for what it's worth.
Yeah,
I will absolutely tell you that. I've talked to them. So,
but I think like what's so interesting about this group is, and part of why I struggled in actually getting a mock out. Like I feel like when even in the lottery, and it is every year, but so many of these guys are going to be dependent on situation. Like I think Arthur Kaluma is really interesting if he goes to a place that is not a super high flow offense, that is going to be able to give him reps. Like, okay, we're going to, similar to what the Pacers have done with Benedict Mathurin this year, obviously not same sets and everything, but like we're going to give you these find ways to get you dribble drive opportunities. We're going to find ways to get you these like the mid post face up touches so you can jab step and go and get closer to the rim before, like kind of like not the same idea, but sort of like what Auburn did with Jabari Smith last year. Like, okay, we're gonna get you off a cross screen into this one-on-one.
Mark.
What? No, I'm saying like
Mark.
obviously that's coming from genius up. Like I'm not saying like that you're not doing that at the NBA level, all right? But my point is like,
but we're comparing Arthur Kaluma to Jabari Smith.
No, I'm not making a comparison. Right? I mean, in terms of like what you're trying to do to get them to work on what they need to. Like, I think I really want to see. I think that there's a framework there with Kaluma that is interesting. But my point is just more broadly speaking, in the wrong situation.
I get where you're going with it.
Yeah, my point speaking is in the wrong situation. I think that could really hurt him. Like, I think he would really struggle in a place like Sacramento. Like, I think a lot of people look and be like, oh, this is a 6'7" wing. Like, he could really thrive there. He's not a good defender right now. Even like on the ball, he can be okay, but I think he has a lot to learn as a defender, especially off the ball. And I think some of that might just never come, honestly. On the ball, like we talked about with Shane Sharp, like not same dude, but like same idea of he likes to really hold the ball. He likes to have a second. Like I don't know if part of it has just been he really wanted to emphasize drives this year, or if he's just more comfortable driving than actually shooting off the catch because he'll attack a closeout with a 10-foot advantage instead of taking the shot more often than not. And that's stuff that I don't think is going to fly at the same level in the NBA. Like, again, if a team is really bought into getting more out of him, I think that there's stuff to be interested about, but it has to be in the right setting. So yeah, I mean, again, that's not at all to compare him to anybody. That's more just like in terms of talking about importance of environment. I think that's what stands out for me about this year's group. I mean, even so, take a guy like Kyle Filipowski, who I still have a lot of interest in. I
I
know that,
do too. Like, I think his defense has actually gotten underrated this
yeah.
year. Like he actually moves pretty well away from the rim.
Yeah, and I think I look at him as a like you need to know how you feel about his shot. Like he's not shot well this year,
Yeah.
to be fair, but also too like he's like, and it's the same idea of what I think about with Bryce Hopkins. Like those are guys that I don't think like I believe in it a lot more with Flip to be a guy who you can kind of have him create his own offense a little bit by just being off the ball and finding ways to attack and find pockets to make himself available. But like I think again, like when you're talking about Bryce, when you're talking about a guy like Max Lewis, like I think those are guys you have to really factor in and be like, okay, we're going to draw stuff up for you. We're going to get you opportunities. And like exactly like you're mentioning, like, okay, if that's not a lottery pick, that's a lot harder to factor in. Like, what are the other skills that are keeping you on the court to make it worthwhile to be able to bake in usage for a guy?
Yeah, like
that,
you're trying to bake in usage for Arthur Kaluma. Like Arthur Kaluma is not going to have the ball in his hands in the NBA, right?
yeah,
So what are his other skills? He's not a great defender, as you just mentioned. Not a
flashes.
great passer. Has flashes for sure.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing too. He's like 6'7" with a 7-foot wingspan, has a great frame. You can absolutely see a world where he becomes a good defender. I think he's worth a flyer from someone for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It's just whether or not it's two-way or a guarantee contract for me, right? Like,
yeah.
but at the end of the day, like he's not gonna have a ball in his hands early. So what does he do when he doesn't have it? Or what does he do as like a ancillary piece? Not a great passer. Like consistently misses like the pass next in the chain pass in order to get an open shot, to go from a good shot to a great shot, right? Or even like an average shot to a good shot, right? So that's what I struggle with is just like how many of these guys have real like off-ball skills. It's why I keep coming back to like Kevin McCullough at the end of the day.
And Jalen Clark too, man. Like
And
I
Jalen Clark.
love
Yep.
Jalen
I
Clark.
like
I
Jalen
think,
Clark.
yeah, both those guys are guys that I think will end up getting maybe a little bit undervalued just by the idea of guys who could be upside swings.
Yep.
And then they end up not that they're going to be starters, but that they find themselves as rotation players. That wouldn't surprise me at all.
And it's why I keep coming back to someone like Andre Jackson. Like Andre Jackson's a really Andre Jackson
I
can't
struggle
shoot
with
at
Andre.
all, which is why he's the significant problem. But he's an elite level defender. He is a good passer playmaker. He's a great transition threat. Like if the shooting ever comes, he's actually a tremendously valuable player. But I don't think he's ever going to shoot it.
See, I think my other problem with him too is like he's not a very good ball handler. Like he's able to beat guys with speed and being bursty, but like he can really struggle to hit shots off the dribble just because his actual gathering is problematic. Like I think like that's stuff that you could hopefully work on. But again, exactly what we're talking about. Like I think there's like even just in games, like he can already struggle right now to attack off the dribble. If there's like any kind of contest. So it's just there's. And that's not to be unfair. Like he is one of my favorite dudes to watch in college. Like I think that there's reason to be excited about him as an NBA guy, but exactly like you're mentioning,
and then here's the last thing about this, right? So let's go back to the lottery, potential top 20 range, right? We just haven't seen a lot of these guys at their best yet.
Yeah.
Dariq Whitehead, missed a bunch of games to start the season. We've talked about, I think before, like I think he still looks a little bit heavy. He doesn't quite have the explosiveness that what he had in high school. I would imagine that'll come back at some point. He'll look like a bit of a different guy. I still don't know if it'll happen this year, like in college. So I don't know if we're going to get to see his best. Nick Smith has played like 5 or 6 games. And I don't know if we're like, maybe we'll see him again. This comes from no inside information. I'm not saying that like we're not going to see Nick Smith again, but he's not playing right now. And I don't know what's going to happen with Nick Smith, right? Cam Whitmore is just now starting to come on in a high level, but for a while we didn't see the best of him. I don't know. Did you watch the Bob Miller Experience last night?
I haven't yet.
Don't like just straight up. It did not go well.
I have not been as tapped in with Florida State this year. I've seen a couple other games, but it's enough to not want me to watch anymore. But I am going to watch them, of course.
And then like Derek Lively was not super impressive. We mentioned Dylan Mitchell at the top. Like a lot of these guys, it's hard. And then like on top of it now, look at what's happening at Arkansas. Like if Nick Smith, again, I have no inside information on Nick Smith, what's going to happen. I'm not saying one way or another if he's going to return. But if he doesn't come back, then that team is going to just get zoned all the time. Like teams are just going to be like, okay, we're just going to collapse the paint because you guys don't have anybody that can shoot from three. And we're not going to see the best from Anthony Black the rest of the year because of it. Because no Trayvon Brazil to go out and space the floor to pick and pop at all. In this scenario, no Nick Smith to, be a threat from outside, to be someone teams have to pay attention to. It's like Jordan Walsh, the Mitchell twins, Jalen Graham, Kamani Johnson, a bunch of guys that are just non-shooters. Devo Davis, like not a guy that people care about if he shoots threes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're not going to see the best out of Anthony Black the rest of the year if Nick Smith doesn't come back. Kentucky is a mess right now, and Casey Wallace had back spasms in their last game. Who knows what's going on there? I guess I'm disappointed. Not in the players themselves. I'm disappointed in how this draft cycle has gone in terms of just, I feel like we haven't seen a lot of these guys perform at their best potential yet. And that's disappointing to me, I guess.
Yeah. No, I think that's totally fair.
Yeah. This cycle bums me out, I guess is what I would say. Watching Wembanyama highlights is amazing. And like, it's almost like a drug where like, oh yeah, I have to get high off that Wembanyama, like in order to like make my sadness about the college basketball season go away. Mm-hmm. Same with Scoot, right? Like you get to watch Scoot like throw down on 6 guys when there are only 5 people out on a court at once. Like that's amazing to me. But and then like watching Amen Thompson and Asor Thompson, like getting away from college basketball has been nice, but this college basketball season has just been like, I don't know, man. It's been a bummer.
I'm
struggling with it. Yeah, I'm really like, just being honest, like I'm struggling with it this year. Mm-hmm. So yeah, what can you do? Okay, Mark, do you have anything you want to talk about before we go?
I think that's honestly it on my end.
Have you watched anything recently that you need to get off your chest?
Anything that I need to get off my chest. I have not watched anything crazy recently. I've been like just watching a lot of the classics. Like I watched Creed again the other day. I am continuing to enjoy I've been watching Modern Family for the first time. Actually, very enjoyable show.
Yeah, it's nice.
But mainly just like I have stuff thrown on in the background because I've been working. So
Laura and I just started watching The Bear on FX.
How's that?
I mean, it's like amazing. It's a show for me, put it that way. It's like a show in a kitchen with like a bunch of middle-class people who are just trying to make ends meet. And it's the most hectic show I think I've seen on television in years. The editing style is frenetic. What's happening is just like chaos at all times. It is amazing. And I adore it.
Well, I need to check it out because I have Hulu finally. So I actually can check it out. But yeah, no, I will have more movie takes next week. I'm working on a feature right now, 2 features right now at the same time, which has been I enjoy the process, but the process is not always kind. So we're working on it.
Yeah. Mark, tell the people where they can find your work. Tell the people what's going on.
You can find me on Twitter at MG_Schindler. That's where I'm most active. I always have my latest work pinned. Appreciate you for having me on, man.
Mark's the best. Go follow him at MG Schindler, MG_Schindler. That is over on Twitter. I have a mock draft out. Go subscribe to that mock draft. What else do I have? Danny LaRue, Seth Partnow, and I are working on something for next week. I also am working on something with Kelly Eco for next week over at The Athletic. I will have a mock draft podcast on Sunday with Adam Spinella. So
I'm not invited.
Join for that. If you want to come and join on Sunday,
I'm joking.
We can figure that out. But we'll do that at some point in the future. We'll do like a 3-person mock draft pod because that'll be a little bit more fun. But that's all I've got. Until next time, we will talk soon. Bye.